All right, guys, we're going to move on from our, basic genetic crossing to some more complex kind of theories and patterns. So, a quick review. You don't need to write anything down for this, but we talked about this for the last section of notes. So, Mendel had three primary laws. The first law was a law of dominance. Ultimately, that dominant traits are always going to be expressed over recessive. The law of segregation, that just means that an offspring gets one copy of an allele from mom and one copy from dad, to the egg and the sperm. And the law of independent assortment is that traits get kind of mixed around and during meiosis, and that's what leads to the kind of unique offspring. So let's get into it. So the chromosome theory of inheritance, this is something that we've talked about, and that's that the genes on chromosomes and the behavior of chromosomes ultimately leads to these inheritant patterns and the laws that we've been talking about. So I don't want to go into this too much because we've talked about meiosis a lot, but ultimately this is the theory of inheritance. Now, there are some exceptions. So we've talked kind of like it is what it is, but there are 4 exceptions to Mendel's 3 laws. So we have incomplete dominance, multiple alleles, codominance, and polygenetic traits. So just make sure that you write the 4 of those down. So the first one, incomplete dominance. There's the stereotypical example to our right. Okay, so if you cross a red flower and a white flower, and you end up with a heterozygous offspring from both homozygous parents, you get something that's in between, right? Incomplete. It's in between. Red plus white equals pink. Okay, so you're not really getting all of the red, and you're not really getting all of the white. You're getting something in the middle. That's incomplete dominance. Pretty simple. All right, here is a quick example. What I want you to do, I want you to read through this example, finish it, and then talk to me when you're done and check it over. Once I've checked the first example over, I want you to do this example too. It's very similar. It shouldn't take you very long. But again, do it and check in with me when you're done. All right, then we have something called codominance. This is similar to incomplete dominance, but kind of the opposite. So you have a cross between 2 homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, and the heterozygous is both traits. So, right, red and white flower crossed, you get a red and white flower as opposed to just pink. Okay, blood type is also a really interesting example of codominance, right? If you have a mom with A blood type and a dad with B blood type, you end up with AB blood type. So again, same here. Read through this example, try it, get the ratios, and then talk to me about it. So, blood type is something that we're going to talk a lot about. So if you don't know your blood type, you really should figure that out either at a physical or something. So if you look to the right at the table, this is very interesting because you can get one phenotype from two different genotypes or just one. Okay, if you have blood A, it could be AA or AI. B could be BB or BI, whereas O can only be II. All right, that's where multiple alleles comes in as well. So blood type is both codominance and multiple alleles. So let's try this. Okay, this is an example with blood type. It's very, very common. You're just trying to figure out blood types of children. You're crossing a mom and dad. Try it. Check in with me. All right, this is the opposite. Now we are trying to figure out who the father is. Right. This is like Maury, the talk show Maury all over again. You are not the father. Okay. Try it. This is a little bit more difficult one, and then check in with me. All right, going a little bit more into multiple alleles. Okay, so we talked about blood type, but we also see fur color in rabbits and other animals too. So ultimately, multiple alleles just means that you have more than one or more than two alleles for one gene. Okay, so one gene could lead to multiple different kind of traits. So, again, they give you the cross, try it, and see what you get, and check in with me. All right. Polygenetic inheritance. This is something that's very interesting, and labs are the most common example here. As you can see right here, we have 3 different labs, right? Chocolate, black, and yellow. Right, same species, pretty much same dog with very similar DNA, but slight differences. Okay, so ultimately, a single trait can be produced by 2 or more genes. Okay, so ultimately, right, chocolate labs, there's a number of different traits like eye color, hair color, size, that are all kind of produced by the same set of genes, and they all go together. You don't really get something in between a chocolate lab and a black lab because you either have this set of phenotypes or this set of phenotypes. That's why they're all very distinct. And we'll talk about epistasis a little later. But ultimately, epistasis is when you kind of have some sort of gene that is the umbrella. It leads to all of these different changes that are going on. So we're moving right along onto linked genes. So linked genes, the name kind of gives it away. So it's kind of like you can't get one without the other. They're always inherited together. Kind of like, there's something we'll talk about in another slide or two about sex-linked traits where there are certain physiological differences between men and women that if you're a man, you get these things and they all come together, and if you're a woman, you get these things and they all come together. So blonde hair and blue eyes often go together, right? If you have blonde hair, it's most likely you're going to have blue eyes. Also, red hair and freckles. 9 times out of 10, you're going to have, if you're going to have red hair, you're going to have freckles. Now, there are some situations where this doesn't happen, and that's because during crossing over, these chromosomes can literally be broken apart. They can be pulled apart, and that's what leads to, I have a friend that has red hair without any freckles. That's because the chromosome was pulled apart during crossing over. All right, this is I think one of the most interesting parts of this kind of section, sex-linked traits. All right, so things that either come from your mom or your dad and only affects maybe women or men. Right, as a review, men and women have ultimately the same autosomes, right? Those are like body genes that code for our body. So pairs 1 through 22, and the last pair are called sex chromosomes, which and that's what determines gender. That's what determines the physiological differences between men and women. Right, and females have XX, right, and that's right there. And men have XY, right? The Y kind of looks like it's a half of a chromosome. So, some interesting things. A Y chromosome obviously is far smaller and carries far fewer genes. Okay, so what this means is that, a lot of information is carried on the X. So women ultimately, have more genetic information because of this one extra, chunk on the chromosome. So we get sex-linked genes. These genes are only found on these X and Y chromosomes, and that's important as we move forward. So with genes that are X-linked, what that means is that it's only found on the X chromosome. Now, why that becomes important is because for men, our X always comes from our mom, and our Y always comes from our father, 100% of the time. So if you look, right, the two on the left are men, and both of the Ys came from the dad. So that means that both of the X's had to come from our mom. Okay? So the mom is a carrier for something. That means that one of her X's has a genetic abnormality. So if you look, the X's came from the dad. So automatically, we know what X's the X for the girls. One of them had to come from the father, and it has to be the X because they obviously didn't get the Y. But you can see that the mom can pass on either X. So one of the boys and one of the girls got this kind of tainted X. Now, because boys only have one X, they are going to get, whether it's color blindness, that's a common one. The second boy would be colorblind, whereas the girl all the way to the right, because it has an X on either side, it would be a carrier. So this is a normal son, a son that maybe has color blindness, normal daughter, and a carrier daughter. So here's our sex-linked example. Okay, so go ahead, try this. Okay, it gives you the cross. Try it. Okay, so hopefully you are able to do this. Let me know when you're done. We'll go over it.